Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I'll be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about behavioral type of coaching, transformational type of coaching, emotional intelligence, and much more. When we get into that conversation, we have to ask ourselves, are we living the life that we want to be living? Are we living the life we should be living? Sometimes that can be a difficult question to ask ourselves because we want nothing more than to not understand or not recognize that we're not pushing ourselves every single day. Because if we don't pay attention to that, then we feel like, well, we're doing all we can. And even though you think you're doing all you can, I assure you that you're not. I remember when one of my mentors asked me, was I willing to work harder than I have ever worked in my whole entire life? And I asked myself, like, wait, am I not working hard? And I was working hard. I was working quite some bit. And my life hasn't been easy up to this point. And I'm under the impression that I am working hard. What are you talking about? You think I have been lazy and I have just not have been producing these past years? But that's not what he was trying to tell me. He was saying that if I don't have what I want, then that means I'm not putting in enough effort quite yet, or I'm doing the wrong things, the wrong actions, the wrong behaviors. And we do have to understand that the behaviors that we do every single day are going to have an impact on our future. And sometimes people try to ignore that. They say, you know what, I just can't be a part of this, or I can't do this, or this is my circumstance, and they allot a certain lifestyle for themselves. Doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means that that is their reality. But the reality that you create for yourself doesn't have to be that. You can create change. You can create promise for yourself. The problem is, how do you get there? And I know for me, when I first started that journey, I was reading a lot of personal development books. I was trying to figure out all the answers by myself. Lo and behold, there was an easier way. I could have got a coach, whether it be a mindset coach, behavior coach, emotional intelligence coach. I could have got someone who helped me transform my life, but I wasn't aware of that resource. I wasn't aware of there's someone who can help me get to where I wanted to be without all the trial and error, without all the failure, without all the uncertainty. Because if I knew that when I needed a coach the most, I would have got it right then and there. I wouldn't have waited till my life was all better and for me to elevate myself with business coaches, mindset coaches, helping me change my mindset even more. Because yes, I have a good mindset, I have a strong mindset, but that doesn't mean I don't utilize other coaches still. I believe in coaching. I believe in education. I believe that I'm always going to be a forever learner. And that's why you see people who go to workshop after workshop, whether you be an executive leading your field, you continue to go and do workshops. You grow. Imagine if Kobe Bryant said, you know what? I'm so far ahead. I don't need any more training. I'm better than everyone else. And he didn't train. What would happen? Eventually someone will catch up. But he knew that he was so far ahead and that no one could catch up to him because of all the work he put in his years before and then his years that was going to be for the future. He knew his work schedule. He knew his work ethic. And no matter how much someone practiced in the summer, in a year, they couldn't catch up all of the compound type of workouts that Kobe did, all the practices he did. And in a sense, that's going to be us when it comes to success, when it comes to our reality in our career. We have a compound type of behavior in our success. If we fail to take opportunities for education, we are going to be limited into what we knew rather than what's happening in the world. And if we look at the world is changing at a rapid rate. So the fact that the world is changing so drastically and so quickly, we need to understand that, okay, this world is changing very quickly. Am I able to adapt? And we can just look at companies like Kodak, for example. They were reigning supreme in the world of photography. And when the world turned digital, Kodak said, no, we're going to stay traditional. We're going to stay the same. And then they basically died out. They lost that number one spot. But how do we get that number one spot? How do we maintain that number one spot? Well, I have good news for you. I have a coach, Brian Clate. He's going to be helping us understand our behaviors. Once we get a good understanding of our behaviors, then we can start to take actions more in line with who we are meant to be. Sometimes we just do things for the sake of doing things or because someone else is doing it and we think it's the quickest way to success. We think it's the quickest way to where we need to be, where we want to be. And sometimes we might get there. I'm not saying it's going to be wrong for everyone, but there has to be a better way. And Brian and I talk about several different ways, several different alternatives that a person can take for them to elevate themselves in their life. So let's get into that interview with Brian and myself and to understand the initial aspects of everything we need to know about our behaviors, our current behaviors, and then going forward to our success. Welcome, Brian Clate, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good. So today I have you on as a behavioral and transformational coach. I know it can be pretty self-explanatory when someone just says that to you or what the work you do, but in your own words, can you explain that job title?
Sure. So what I try to do is work with folks who are trying to achieve some type of goal. It could be an individual, a team, or an organization. And they're trying to reach a goal that is either new to them or they've been trying to reach for a while and haven't been able to. And then what I focus on with individuals is what behaviors are you undertaking that are preventing you from achieving that goal? Through an emotional intelligence-based focus, start to identify why you're taking the actions you're taking and start developing different types of emotions and different types of behaviors that when you apply them actually help you achieve the goals as opposed to continue to fall short.
And would you say this is like a habit thing where people just get into a habit of doing the wrong things? Or is it something more of, well, this is the easy road, I'm just going to take the easy road?
It can be either one of those. There's a number of reasons why people have developed behaviors and have behavioral patterns. The folks that I typically work with are folks who have been trying to break patterns for an extended period of time and have not been able to figure out why they've been doing it. And so when I work with folks initially, there's always to start off with, let's understand you initially. Let's not try to point fingers externally to the world, say the world makes me do this, or my mom made me do this, or let's talk about you and really what has that behavior been doing for you? Because the one thing about working with folks on behaviors is that people don't do things typically by happenstance unless you're put in like an immediate fight, flight, or freeze type moment. The behavior you're doing has been successful for you in one way, shape, or form. And so the goal is to try to get people to understand what that behavior has been getting for them for a period of time, and then understanding where it's coming from, and then what is it you have to change if you want to get to that next level, regardless of how that behavior pattern started.
And I love that because that's going to be the individualized approach. It's not going to be one of those cookie cutter things where it's like, okay, this is your problem because it's everyone else's problem. You have a unique problem. So what your behavior is might be unique because you have a different situation. And I think that's important to realize because education or just teaching and coaching in general is going to be a people to people type of profession. And I know that's kind of shying away as we go on because now it's kind of like, okay, well, how many programs can I sell? How many clients can I get versus how many people can I help? And I know when we're dealing with like transforming people and then looking at people individually, I think that's to be more effective than just the cookie cutter type of programs. In your experience, do you think that's more impactful than just a generic type of program for coaching?
Absolutely. Most, if not all of my clients, whether they've been individuals, teams, or corporations, are coming to me because some other type of coaching has failed. And, I'll raise my hand and say that the reason why I actually got into coaching was that I found the benefit of that individualized approach. Before I was a coach, I was an officer, I was an executive within the corporate world, held those titles at multiple large corporations. And you always went through the standard HR programs, or they would send you outside to go to some seminars where there's 500 people and you're all getting the same stuff that this person is touring and touting around the country. And it wasn't until I started working with one particular coach specifically who saw me as an individual and started to understand how to help me break that stuff down as an individual that I was actually able to start to flourish in the space that I wanted to. And what was amazing to me was that when we did it, it wasn't just me and him by myself. And then it wasn't just me with one individual afterwards. It was with a group of 28 other executives. And the key was realizing each one of those 28 executives were part of a bigger ecosystem, right? You have your individual self, and then your individual self has to find a way to interact with that ecosystem of a team, and then the bigger ecosystem of the organization. And being able to understand that each one of those layers is its own entity that needs its own attention was critical.
That's important to surround yourself with people who are going to give you that type of mindset or different type of perspective. So you were with one coach and they basically introduced you to other different types of minds. I always find that to be so interesting when it comes to education, because if you're a teacher, even if you're a coach going into a seminar or workshop, and you set the tone for that whole entire space that you're in, that you're creating, everyone else kind of follows in order versus it's kind of like, okay, this room is just going to be the standard room and everyone is going to be their own different person. So we don't create that energy. But actually, there is a power when we go on stage, when we talk to people, a group of people, we're in front of a group of people, or we are just a part of a group of people, how we kind of conform to that mentality. And I think that's important for us to understand the behaviors of the people around us. In society today, we can look on Twitter, we can look on Facebook, we can see all the different types of behaviors. And many people might say that they are negative. I'm not sure if it's just a generational thing where kids are growing up eating Tide Pods and now they're all messed up in the head, or if they're going to be like, you know what, I can use my own pronouns. There's so much more freedom, First Amendment, all of these different ways of thinking, how it influences or changes their behavior. So in a sense, we kind of lost the traditional way of thinking and maybe going into a more modern way of thinking. I know this is kind of like a rabbit hole, but I would like to unpack that a little bit with you today.
Sure. And Tide Pods aside, there's the one thing that I would say, and I do work with quite a bit of youth. And what I call by youth, I'm 50 years old. So anything, under 30 now to me is youth. I can't believe I've hit that point in my life that I've become that old man. But what's interesting, the dynamic that I've seen is that the youth today still want what we wanted back in the day. They want independence. They want success. They want financial. And a lot of times that's tied to this belief that, higher levels of finance gets you that. And so what you're seeing a lot, especially on the TikTok and the influencers and things of that nature, is a quicker route to obtain it. What's getting lost in the space is how to actually interact with individuals. So, I'll use an example. If you look all the way back to when TV first started to come out, there was always, before the TV program, like we're talking like in the 50s, there was that guy in the dapper suit, standing there next to a box of, Wheaties or whatever, saying, brought to you by our sponsor. And then the person would come out and they were basically the initial influencers. Technology has made it so that individuals now can become, try to influence with whatever direction they want to influence. But what's happened is rather than have that back and forth connection with folks, they get their satisfaction through how much their bank account is going up and how many clicks they're getting. And when those two things are tied together, what it means is that the behaviors that you do aren't necessarily tied to who you are as a person or what type of person you're trying to be or what type of change you're trying to bring about. It's about what gets me those clicks, which means I can act in any way I want. As long as that little click comes up, I'm going to view that as success. So right in the corporate world, we always ask people to define what does success look like. And even in today's world, we're asking that same thing. And when I work with folks, what I find amazing when I'm working with individuals is how success never is really around developing a strong relationship. It's about what can I get out of a relationship.
That's interesting because we're so worried about success, I think, where we're told to be successful, we're told how to be successful, but it's so skewed if we look at the education system. Work a 9 to 5, work until you're 65. When you're 65, you can finally be happy. That's basically it in a nutshell. Now, the newer generation sees that of like, I don't really want to work till I'm 65. I want to work till I'm 30. I want to work until maybe I'm 40. And they want to get to this place where they think happiness reigns. And so they will, in a sense, sell their soul, meaning they're going to do something that is not in line with who they are just to make their goal, right? So they finally get the money they want, the notoriety they were looking for, only to find when they get there, they're not happy. And we can see this on Instagram, especially with like Instagram models. And they have all these followers, all these likes, but if you talk to them, they're depressed, they are lonely. Even though they have this audience of people who are all eyes on them, they still feel empty. And it's because maybe they're not doing something that's in line with their soul, of what their purpose is. And when they go against that, the behaviors that they do don't correlate with who they should be. And I think that just kind of hurts society as a whole, because that individual has an opportunity to do something that only they can do. I'm a huge believer in that we can do something that no one else can do, that you can do something that I can't do. And it's not that I can't do it, it's just the way that you do it is not going to be the same as if I do it. If you and I were educational teachers, for example, and we went into a kindergarten classroom, I'm almost certain you could be successful. Now, you might have to get that experience if you don't have it already, but I'm sure you can be successful. But how you are successful in getting those classroom students to learn and to have fun is going to be different than how I do it. I'm almost certain about that, because I have went through that process. And even though I had cooperating teachers who did it a certain way, and I saw hundreds of teachers do it a different way, it doesn't necessarily mean that their way is the right way or my way is the right way. It's a unique way for those kids, for those students. And it's kind of like a magic when you work with someone. It's kind of like you have to figure out what works for each individual, but then you also have to look what works for that whole classroom. Now, of course, we try to get 100% inclusion and everyone on board. Sometimes we're not able to do that. So we would get as much as possible. And then when everyone is doing like group work and things like that, we'll do the focus work with an individual who is just not getting it. That's just education in a nutshell. But, as I was saying, you can be successful as an educational teacher. I can be successful as an educational teacher. It's just that we do it in a different way. And I think so many people nowadays, they see like, oh, I could be a YouTuber. Oh, I can be a model. Oh, I can do this, right? Like I know a lot of people play video games and they want to be like a video gamer, like Ninja. Like Ninja's he's like a big video gamer. I think he played Fortnite or something. And so he made millions of dollars playing a video game. And now everyone wants to be like him, versus they want to be themselves and make their own way. Everyone is more of a follower in a sense versus a leader. If we look at all the social medias, whether it be from LinkedIn all the way to Instagram, you're a follower, you follow someone. And that mentality is kind of saying, well, I'm just going to do what other people do, rather than say I'm a leader and I'm going to do what leaders do and lead and pave the way and be trailblazers and do things uniquely. So our behavior is more in line of only what followers do rather than what leaders do. If someone wanted to change that, they wanted to change that behavior, what are some steps or some directions that we can go down to change that type of mindset of being a follower to now being maybe more in line to being a leader?
So the first mindset to break, and this is something that I work with leaders frequently, especially those that are transitioning from like the standard desk to now leading a group of people, is that you can't become a leader just by title. You can't become a leader just because you say you're a leader. And the first person you have to learn to lead is yourself, right? You're not going to be able to lead others effectively if you're not leading yourself effectively. So what does that mean? It means leadership requires more than just people checking a box and watching what you do. When you're a leader, one of the number one things that come is accountability. So if you're going to become a leader, you have to first step in and accept that you are going to start becoming accountable for those things that you do, right? If you're going to lead yourself, it also means you're accountable for if you're going to lead others, you got to become accountable for the actions of the group. It doesn't remove responsibility, if someone else makes a mistake, because that's different than trying to be a controlling individual. But the first step is you've got to accept that you are going to become accountable. And I have seen that. That is one thing generationally that I've seen significantly different is this concept of personal accountability. So the first step is there. The second thing that you would want to do, and again, we're talking very high level here, is, and you have mentioned it, which is to start understanding why you actually want what it is you think you want. If you're only searching fame will come to you. The thing is, though, it might be on an episode of Cops. Right? It may not come the way you think it's going to come. So you have to be much more specific, much more targeted. When I work with a lot of folks, what they'll talk about is things in a very high level, generic sense. And they won't get down to why this is important. And the one thing that I'll give folks is The easiest way to find that answer, ask yourself, you can write it on a piece of paper, you can record yourself, you do whatever you want, but ask yourself why this is important to me, and then get that answer. And then when you have that answer, ask yourself that same question again. It's called the 5 whys. It's a 6 Sigma practice. If you ask yourself why 5 times, on the 5th one, you will get to, very close to the root of what it is you're trying to do. We would call it root cause analysis. This is something that you do. When you do this, you'll find the answer as to why you want to be what you think you want to be, or why you want that goal. And then what you want to do is tie those 2 things together. Except that this last answer is why you're really doing this. Hold yourself accountable to being that person. And then what you start to do is change the way you act so that you are lining up with that last answer. You just keep holding yourself accountable to it.
I love what you said about the excuses, where, yes, you're right. We are in a society where people will give an excuse before they take ownership, or where they take accountability is the word you used. I don't know where we fell off, where people have shied away from taking ownership. I remember, growing up, for me, it was like, if you do something wrong, own it. Versus now it's kind of like, well, who can we blame? Right. Mm-hmm. So if someone does something wrong, let's say we're in a corporate environment and we are in a group and we are not able to get the project done or the presentation done on time, and we blame the other teammate for that. The presentation still didn't get done, right? We were part of that group. And even though one person might have played a role in not being done, you still have to show up. And I remember when I was doing my master's and I was doing a group project with 3 people. So it was 4 people total, including me. And the group consisted of, well, we were all going to be teachers. Me, there was another teacher who was going for her master's at the time. So she was already in school. And then there were students my age. And they were just, going to get their master's to be teachers also. The teacher who was already working and everything, she was like 100%, no fluff, let's get this project done, versus the other 2 were more in line of, well, I'm busy and I can't do it. And when we got down to the end of the whole process in the project, it was like we did all of the work, her and I, because if we didn't do the work, the project would have never been done, because they were doing, their own life. They were taking care of their own thing. And they were like, well, I'm so busy. I have work. I mean, yes, I have work too. We have a commitment together as a team, as a group, to get this project done. And it was so interesting because toward the end of that project, we had just one thing to do. Her and I did most of the work. We gave little bits of work to the other people, but it was only a fraction of what was really having to be done. We gave one assignment to one of the members and saying, hey, the only thing you have to do is this, because they were trying to do things. It's just everything wasn't working out. Well, they did the assignment wrong. They edited the wrong file. And so what had happened was, when we got the file back, it wasn't the right file. We showed the teacher, and the teacher was like, this is not the file that I want to edit it. And we were like, oh my God, because it's due in literally 5 hours. And this is a lot of work that we have to edit. And so I remember the teacher calling me, and she was just crying. She was like, I can't believe this. Like, we did all this work, and then now we are left with having to edit all of this work. And it was about 3 hours of work. And she had bronchitis, so she couldn't even talk. So she was miserable. And I just told her, I said, just take a breather. We're going to do it, you and me. We're just going to do it. And so I edited the file with her on the phone for about 3 hours, 14 minutes, I think was the exact time. And so we got the file done. Now, when we gave it to the teachers, of course, she was like, good, this is the right file, right? We did exactly what we were supposed to do. The other 2 wanted our file. Now, the other 2 didn't want to be on the phone with us. They didn't want to offer input to us. So what we did was we said, here's the file that you have to edit. Feel free to edit it, because we had to edit it. We did most of the work and everything like that. They were a little bit butthurt, right? One person who was supposed to do the file was so upset at herself because she edited the wrong file. So she was kicking herself in the butt. And then one person who was just expecting all the answers and given everything was hurt because she wasn't given everything. So it was kind of like, you have to work if you want to eat. for me, again, like I was raised to take accountability. So at that time, I knew I couldn't yell at her or I couldn't yell at any of my group members to say, hey, you're not producing. So I took it into my own hands. But that's just the behavior of the modern type of people. I was raised traditionally. It was different than I think their type of upbringing, where it might have been maybe getting more into a modern sense of upbringing where the entitlement was right there. You can sense it. It was right there. Not saying that they're bad people. It's just a different way. They were expecting the answers. They were expecting the results without the work. And I know it's because the brain likes easy, but if we don't put in work for failure, if we don't put in work for progress and success, how can we be so entitled still to expect those things in our life?
So there was a lot in that little description you gave. There was a bunch of dynamics in there. And by the way, what you just described happens in homes, happens in the corporate world, happens on baseball fields. It doesn't matter where you go. When you start to have a group of people coming together, you're going to have those potential dynamics. We think that those types of things are unique to us, and it's not. I mean, if there's anyone who watches professional sports out there, you can take a look at the New England Patriots, who, as much as I despise, the fact that, they always win, there's a reason they're always successful. And it's because from the very beginning, when a group forms, you have to be able to set those expectations and set those ground rules. And you have to start to identify what each person is looking to get out of that meeting, that grouping, and what they're willing to commit to get it. So one of the things, like you mentioned, the one individual who was used to just everything being done for them, there may be a pattern there. That may be their behavior. Or there may have been a situation where, for some reason, for this moment and this time, they had to commit someplace else. So like I would use as an example, if I was your teammate back in July of last year, you probably would have had to have done things without me because I was hospitalized for 3 weeks. If my wife was your partner, she probably would have told you that because the whole house, 3 of the members of the house were hospitalized, she can't help you. She's not available to you. But what was interesting to me was your willingness to take on that accountability of somebody else. So for that person to go easy requires other people to take on the willingness to do the heavy lifting. And if you had raised your hand and said, I'm not doing this heavy lifting. If you and your teacher, teammate would have said, we're not doing it. What's more important to us is that we have equal shares in this. It may mean that I don't get that A+, but come heck or high water, you're going to do some work because it's more important for me, for me to have that interaction, that relationship, and that this team dynamic gets itself addressed, as opposed to just getting that accolade and getting that credit. There are going to be everywhere that you go within the world, even in today's modern society, you're going to have those folks who aren't viewed as bringing value, but are not held accountable through their own actions. And then you're going to have those people who are high achievers who are going to put everybody on their shoulders and drag them through. Both of them, 15 years later, are going to run into different problems. The high achievers have burnout. The lower achievers are the ones looking back and saying, I have not done anything. But in the end, they both reach this point of realizing that what they've been doing isn't sustainable. Now, you did ask a question about when did this start happening? And I'm old enough to at least speak from my own experience of what I've seen. And I can tell you that when this looked like it started to make a change was in the late 80s and through the 90s. And I can tell you in the corporate world when these things started to change, because I was there when it happened. And it started with laws and policies in the corporate world that no longer made me as an individual be responsible for how I was going to react to something. You'll hear it a lot nowadays that, whether they're the harassment laws or the toxic workplace environment or, things of that nature, it actually became legal to look at you and say, anything that you've said, if I personally take offense to it, that's not mine to own. I now can punish you by going and complaining that you've said something that's offended me. And it's not my responsibility to deal with and address that offense. It's your responsibility to now try to figure out what you can say and can't say that won't offend me. And while it was good intended back in the 80s and 90s, because there was some stuff that needed addressed and corrected, as with anything else, it's now been taken and now it's used as a way to gain success within an organization. Whether that organization is school, in a classroom, on a ball field, or in corporations, or even in a household. right? I'm no longer responsible. You've made me mad. That's you. And even, it's one of the things where I differ from a lot of coaches in this space, especially on the emotion intelligence side, is that a lot of the emotion intelligence sides talks about the importance of empathy and the ability to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And I'm a bit off with this in that I don't want folks that I work with or folks that I interact with doing that. I actually want that to stop. I want folks to become empathetic towards themselves, feel comfortable, expressing care towards others, but you don't do that by stepping in their shoes. You do that by becoming very clear about what is my intent with this individual right now, and then engaging with that individual to find out why what it is that I'm trying to do isn't being received in that way, and start having that conversation and that interaction. Because the minute you start putting yourself in someone else's shoes, the only person you're talking with is yourself. And you've left the other person not just out of the conversation, but they're no longer even responsible for doing anything more than taking what you give them. And that's not a way to become effective from a communication standpoint or even from a behavioral standpoint.
I have two ways I like to view this as. First is sugar and spice. And then the second one is tough love. I want to see you succeed. I want to see you do well. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to push you. I'm not afraid to ask you to do things that I know you don't want to do, but you have to do them, right? It's that type of relationship you have with them saying, I know this is going to suck, but we have to get past that, right? So F your feelings, F what you're thinking. This needs to be done this way. And it's not that your way is the highway. People get into the habits of doing things that just don't work, and they keep doing it and again and again and again, and they hope for a different result. That's insanity. But it's the easy way. It's the easy way. So they're going to take the easy road as much as possible, as far as they can. And then when they finally get there, they either say, A, well, this is who I am. This is as far as I can go. They accept complacency. Or B, they get a coach and they say, you know what? I know I can do more. I know I can be more. How do I change? How do I transform my life? And that is a crossroad. Kind of like you were saying, how if you're a high achiever or if you're one of those people who just kind of, is hang out, eventually you're going to hit a crossroad. When you hit that crossroad, you have to make that choice. Do you want to change or do you want to remain the same? And I think a good portion of people remain the same because it's easier. It's just so easy to not take action. I can come home and I can easily turn on the TV versus saying, I'm going to read a motivational book or, a blog or something like that, or personal development resource to make sure I'm better, or, look up a coach like yourself and saying, hey, I need some help and some assistance.
The one thing I'll add is the one thing we don't want to ignore is biology. Human beings dislike change. Just absolutely, they abhor it. There's, and again, I know that the science is always moving on this, but there are parts of your brain that trigger whenever change occurs. And it could be external stimulus or internal stimulus or perceived stimulus. Your body does everything it can to avoid changing. To your point, it's more than just being easy. It's that, and again, it's always changing, but there's something along the lines of like 80% of the processes for which we operate within the normal world, the patterns that we see, how we interpret, it's subconscious. And so being able to have those patterns available to us allows us to interact in the world. And the ability to break those patterns, the ability to break how we see the world is very complicated. And there are many times where it's viewed within your brain as life-threatening. And when you have situations like that, where your mind is actually potentially telling you that this is a life-threatening change, if you did this, you are threatening your existence or your ability to exist, folks are going to resist. And that's just natural human biology. I'll give an example of how small of a thing this is. And I was working with the person who talked about how much they love change, because we were putting on a change seminar, and I was sitting on one table, and this person was talking about how much they love change and they thought change was great. They're all behind change. And so I took this individual's sunglasses and I moved them from in front of them to in front of me. And that's all I did was move their sunglasses. And the look on this person's face was mortification. And I looked at the individual. I said, so tell me how much you like change right now. And he started laughing and said, I guess I don't. I said, we can take this further. Give me your cell phone and let me change your password. See if you can get into it. Humans in general, they don't understand how hardwired they are to trying to keep everything status quo. Even those who claim to be change agents or change champions, what they really mean is they like it when they can change the world for others after they've had a chance to get ready to accept them. So it's one thing, one of the things you want to take into consideration. A lot of change management, a lot of change, behavioral change comes from, its roots comes from things that when you start talking about like, the stages of grief and things of that nature, because you're going through the same thing. Somebody's passed or you're going through a stage of grief, a change has been forced upon you, but mentally you're going through it. When you're starting to talk about transforming folks, when they haven't had that external impact, you have to realize that they're still going through those same phases. And so whether it's because it's easy, right? So if I asked you to stop being the high achiever that you are, and we had to change that behavior, that would be just as difficult for you as a person, the ant and the grasshopper. It'd be just as hard to change that grasshopper who's fiddled away and is expecting things to come to them.
It's like when people get thrown into a nursing home, they might be independent, they might be able to take care of themselves, and they get put into a nursing home, maybe from their kids, and they say, Mom, Dad, just take a break, you deserve it. And they're just getting up, and they're still doing all these things that they know they can. And now the kids are like, they're saying, take a break, take it easy. And they're like, no, I'm going to get up and I'm still going to do it. And I worked in a nursing home for about 6 years. What I will tell you is that the people who get into nursing homes and they conform to that environment of saying, okay, well, I have my food come to me, I don't have to get up, and they stay in bed, they deteriorate so much quicker than if they're up and about and they're talking to people, they're doing things, even though it might be annoying to the nurses because they're like, oh, now, this person's a fall risk or something like that. That person is keeping their mind alive. Even though they're in a different environment, they're still able to make the change.
Yeah, because they're staying true to who they are. Their external environment has changed. They stay true to who they are. And what would be interesting, I guess I would ask you the question because I haven't done a lot in that space, but I would be very interested in understanding of the individuals who stayed who they were, how many went to the home willingly and raised their hand and said, I'm going to be a part of this and I'm happy to accept this environmental change versus those who didn't have a say?
I would say it's on both spectrums. I saw both cases where sometimes they would be in there because it's a recovery type of thing where they were in the hospital and they're just going to be in there for about 3 months and then they're going to go home. And then there's sometimes the kid wanted the parent to be looked after. There were cases where they were like, I just can't be by myself, so I need to be in a home. So I would say the majority is going to be they're in there against their will.
And those were, but you saw them having just as much success as the ones that didn't go in against them.
I would say I saw more anger from the people who didn't want to be in there. They resented it. They eventually became accustomed to it. But in the beginning months or when something bad or negative happened, you can really tell their whole mindset shift. I remember there was one gentleman, he was in a wheelchair and he had a best friend. They were buddies. They would always go to the front, hang out with the receptionist. They were like two peas in a pod. And they did this for a better part of about 2 years. Well, eventually one of the friends passes away. And it's unfortunate because now this other gentleman who had his buddy, he don't want anything to do with life, even though this person, and I'm just going to use color, for example, one was a black man, one was a white man. The white man had passed away first. The black man, he was so hurt that his buddy had died and he didn't want anything to do. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to get changed. He just wanted to, wither away. And it's so interesting how just the time from when he was there, a couple of years, how they formed that strong relationship where they were, buddies. And then when he had lost that buddy, the conversation was this, like, Happy New Year. It's just another year. Where it was like, yes, I'm going to make this year my best year yet. It changes, it seems like, especially when they go into that environment. It's kind of like, this is my life now. I'm just going to die here. They don't think in a different way. They just say, well, this is my livelihood, and they accept it to the point. And when negative things happen, it affects them so much more.
So on the emotional intelligence side, when I'm working with folks that are like that, or, emotions are very important. And a lot of times the emotion you bring to something actually delivers the outcome. And so you mentioned anger, right? Anger is an emotion. And anger can be a very effective emotion to motivate folks, to get people to take an action. But it's very difficult to sustain over a long period of time, right? If you're always angry, or if anger is the only one that you're always bringing, it's very difficult. And believe it or not, again, when you're being angry, you're angry at yourself for something, and that anger is to you. So you're trying to motivate yourself, right? That's what you're trying to move forward. So it's very short term, very punishing after a long period of time. You mentioned the gentleman who kind of, for lack of a better term, gave up. That emotion's apathy. And that's the lowest level of emotion. When you work with individuals who are in that apathetic mode and they can't even get themselves to be angry about something, right? So when you go in the home and you're angry, I'm here. Short term, you can use that as a way to be defiant, right? I can still do the things I didn't do before. But if you don't move from that emotion of anger, and I'm going to use the phrase upward, into more elevated levels of emotions, the place you go is one step down, which is apathy, which is why bother. And then, as you said, once you've hit that stage, once you've hit why bother, if you don't want to come out of it, that's when deterioration happens. That's when it escalates extremely quickly, because you've given up yourself, you've given up your desire, you've given up any intent to make anything for yourself. And that's a very, again, apathy is a very potent emotion. And in the short term, I want to say even shorter term than anger, it has its purpose. Apathy has a way to protect you. However, if you don't come out of it, you will stay in that protected shell, in that shell of non-growth. So again, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, when I work with individuals, we want to make sure people understand what emotion they are bringing. Mm-hmm. Because each level of emotion allows you to be either more successful or less successful, depending upon what it is that's going on in your life.
And the things we talked about today, we can go so much deeper into apathy, into anger, into the emotions and how it affects our behaviors. And this is just an introductory type of conversation for all the audience members to kind of get a good feeling of where you are. Because if you ask yourself, I am angry, wow, or I am at that point of apathy where it's like, I don't want to do it. And I'll say this, when my great grandmother had passed away, the day after she passed away, I felt angry. It was just anger. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't regret. It was anger. And I remember my brother and I just having a conversation. He goes, how you doing? And I said, I just feel angry. I just felt so angry. And he said, I felt the same. And I was like, that's interesting how someone we love, we lost, but we feel anger, not sadness. So I think getting a good understanding of your emotions and then going from there and making changes and changing your behaviors and changing your circumstances is going to be essential for you to change your life. And I know in that point in time where you are angry, you might be full of apathy, and you don't want to make that change. I do encourage you to make the change. And we have wonderful people like Brian who can help make that change a little bit, or to make that transition a little bit more easy, because change is difficult. Change is going to be something the human brain is going to avoid at all costs, but it's not impossible. So if I can from you, Brian, please share any last words, and then please tell people where they can find you.
So the last words that I would share is for folks just to realize that you have control over yourself. The question is, do you want to take it? Do you want to grab for it? And so the last, be willing to take that chance, be willing to grasp for it, be willing to dream a little bit higher. And even though it's scary, take that step forward and reach out. The best way to get a hold of me, there's a couple ways. You can find me on LinkedIn at, my name, Brian Clate, Clate. You can reach out via phone or text at 860-341-1198, or visit the website, which is awakenedexplorations.com. Reach out to us through there. Any of those methods, you'll be able to find me very easily.
Perfect. And I will have all of those links and descriptions below. So for anyone who is driving or is not able to get to a pen right now, you can easily just find all his links. So if you're interested in working with Brian, he's going to be available for you via those methods. And then, of course, you can start to change your life. And it is going to be scary in the beginning, but it doesn't have to be lonely too. So have someone like Brian Clate who's going to help you get to the places that you want to go. Be adventurous, be daring, and don't be afraid to ask yourself why you're doing this. Ask yourself, if I don't do this, what is going to be my circumstance? Because I believe if you do take that road of personal development and making your life better, you're going to be in a better state of mind in the future than if you just allowed complacency to take over your life. So thank you so much, Brian Clate, for coming on Coaching Session. So much wisdom and a great conversation.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. I would like to thank you for watching the interview with Brian Clate and myself. As you can see, he's a man who has allowed wisdom to bless him over the years. And he's not a stranger to knowledge. He's not a stranger to wisdom, where he understands what he is doing, what he does. One of the things him and I talked about was he has a different approach when it comes to emotional intelligence. And I remember he was like, I'm not one of those people who's saying love yourself and self-care and pamper yourself. And it's okay if you're looking in the mirror and you're like, well, I'm still beautiful. No, sweetheart, you're obese. And I know it's a hard pill to swallow. When it comes to apathy, when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to understanding where you are, you do have to realize where you are. And you do have to accept sometimes a hard truth. If I'm a jerk, I need to realize I'm a jerk. And if I can say that I'm a jerk, yeah, I know I'm a jerk. This is why I'm a jerk. Do I want to change it? The answer might be no. If I don't want to change it, I don't have to change it. Now, I do have to ask myself at a deeper level, is it conducive to what I want in my life, my success, my character? There's a whole plethora of conversations that have to happen in order for me to kind of go down a certain road. But I remember when I was a swim coach, I was like almost like militant. I was a drill sergeant. And even though I was able to touch base on an emotional level to those students, it was tough love. It was, you're going to work until we're done. There's no mommy or daddy coming to save you. You're in the pool with me and we're going to get this work done. And I always got to that point with them where I was able to push them, and they didn't look for mom and dad to save them. They didn't look for mom and dad to say, this is too much work. They basically said, I'm here with Mike. I got to show up. And they showed up. 3-year-olds showed up more than adults because they understood the environment that they were about to step in. And if you don't understand the environment that you're in, and if you don't have people who can challenge you to be better and to be more, you're going to find yourself not giving more, not being better. So I encourage you to find a coach, to find a mentor, to find someone who's going to guide you to that better life, to that higher self of being, because you're not going to just naturally change. Now, if you are going to change, it's typically going to come with a trauma. So you wait until you get hurt, until you have a hardship, and then you start to change. But that is not something you have to do. You don't have to hit that hard point, that rough patch in your life to start to make that change. You can make the change today. Things might be a little bit shaky. Things might be a little bit unknown, but it doesn't mean that you can't make the change. I have clients who, when they come to me, they don't have the necessary funds for coaching. And so they make the necessary funds where they say, well, I'm going to get some odd jobs. I'm going to cut some grass. I'm going to clean some windows. I'm going to go sell some water bottles on the side of the road. Whatever it be, just to get the fee for the coaching. They're always amazed after the first month of coaching how their life changes so drastically. That money they invested in themselves compounded immediately. That's the power of coaching, because when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to our own behaviors and our own habits, we become blind in a sense. We think that we're just doing the right thing. And when someone points out, hey, you're doing this, you're like, oh yeah, you're right. But it's difficult for us to realize what we're doing. And that's why even I have coaches. That's why even though I have a wonderful mindset, utilize other people with expertise and wisdom to help me grow and to see my blind spots, because we all have them. We just have to be made aware of them. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to be made aware of them? Because if you do, then you're going to be in a higher level of thinking and then a higher level of progression, because you want something more for yourself. You want something more for your life. And you should have the utmost in your life because you only have one. So if you want to make an impact in your life today, if you want to make profound meaning, you need to start to take action. And what a better time than now than to take action. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me, coachingasession@gmail.com. Of course, revenconcepts.com if you are looking for coaching. I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone, take care.